now we get to the sealing of the 144,000 and the rapture of the church in Revelation 7:1, which begins, "And after these things I saw 4 angels standing on the 4 corners of the earth, holding the 4 winds of the earth, that the wind should not blow on the earth, nor on the sea, nor on any tree." But here we see in the book of Revelation chapter 7, the angels are holding back the 4 winds from touching the earth. And Revelation 7:2-4 then says, "And I saw another angel ascending from the east, having the seal of the living God, and he cried out with a loud voice to the 4 angels to whom it was given to hurt the earth and the sea, saying, Hurt not the earth, neither the sea, nor the trees, till we have sealed the servants of our God in their foreheads. And I heard the number of them which were sealed, and there were sealed 144,000 of all the tribes of the children of Israel." Here we see, the 144,000 mentioned. And so the angels are told not to hurt the earth by way of God's wrath, which is about to come, until the servants of God, the 144,000 that we see here mentioned, the very beginning of chapter 7, are sealed upon their foreheads. And 7:5-8 then goes on to describe the division of the Hebrew tribes that make up the 144,000. Verse 5, "Of the tribe of Judah were sealed 12,000. Of the tribe of Reuben were sealed 12,000. Of the tribe of Gad were sealed 12,000. Of the tribe of Asher were sealed 12,000. Of the tribe of Nephthalim were sealed 12,000. Of the tribe of Manasseh were sealed 12,000. Of the tribe of Simeon were sealed 12,000. The tribe of Levi were sealed 12,000. Of the tribe of Issachar were sealed 12,000. Of the tribe of Zebulun were sealed 12,000. Of the tribe of Joseph were sealed 12,000. Of the tribe of Benjamin were sealed 12,000. Now, we see the 144,000 from 12 specific tribes of the nation of Israel. And now a lot of Christians today will say that the 144,000 are Jews. But Jews in particular are from the tribe of Judah. So while I understand generally what they're saying, they're the Jews, they're the different tribes, but if we're getting technical and theological about it, Jews in particular come from the tribe of Judah. So these are not all Jews, but they are Hebrews. They are the Israelites and the Jews combined. Just a technical point there, but it is an important distinction to make in light of today's sermon. And, you might say, well, look, when we're referring to the Jews, we're speaking generally, and that's true. I understand that, but there's a reason why I'm making this distinction, and that is because it's not just 144,000 general Jews, it's 12,000 from each specific tribe of the nation of Israel and Judah. And not only that, but we learn in Revelation 14, Revelation 14, which is a parallel from the second half or second division of the book of Revelation, that the 144,000 are not only specific people from each of the 12 tribes, but are also men who are virgins. And so we get further enhancement of their identity. We understand a little bit more by comparing Revelation 7-14. Remember, I talked about the book of Revelation has a division right down the middle, 1-11 read chronologically, and then 12-22, the book resets with the birth of Christ. We go from 12-22 again chronologically, covering many of the same events. That's why we see the trumpets in the first half of the book of Revelation, speaking of God's wrath to come in chapter 8, which we'll see. And then we also see the vial judgments later on in the second half, but these are both covering the same thing. We're going to cover that as we go through the trumpet judgments and the vial judgments happen concurrently. And so here, and I'll show that to you when we get to it, but here we see a comparison in Revelation 7-14. We gain greater insight into who the 144,000 are. Revelation 14:4 says, "These are they which were not defiled with women, for they are virgins." So they're men and they're virgins, and they're specifically 12,000 from each of the 12 tribes of Israel and Judah. Now, tell me, think about this. How are we going to find, in today's day and age, 144,000 male virgins who just happen to be specifically from each of the 12 tribes of Israel or Judah? 12,000 from the tribe of Judah, 12,000 from the tribe of Reuben, Gad, Asher, Nephthalim, etc. This is very specific, and I take the Bible very literally. So when it says 12,000 from those specific tribes, it's not just talking about there's going to be the Jews, are going to be 144,000 Jews. It's from the specific tribes. It's definitely not the 144,000 of the Jehovah's false witnesses. That's not what we're talking about either. That could be another sermon. But it's 12,000 from each tribe, and who just, happen to be from those tribes, who happen to be men, who happen to be virgins. And this poses a problem on the surface, at least for those who believe that the 144,000 are from people who will be around currently and presently during the end times. Because if you think about it, and this will all become clear in a minute, I'm going to explain, but if you think about it, through thousands of years of different tribes and peoples and nations and races intermingling and intermarrying, how do you trace someone from the line of Zebulun or Benjamin or Judah? How do you do that? It's not even possible. Our DNA has been so intermingled throughout the ages that, who actually has pure blood, except the unvaccinated, the pure bloods. But in terms of, in terms of DNA, who actually has pure blood from the tribe of Judah in them now, or the tribe of Gad? The DNA pool has been heavily mixed and diluted. Just look up all the verses in the Old Testament. This has been going on for a long time, where the Israelites commingled with pagan nations to their own detriment. We see that, for example, take Ezra 9, 1 through 2. It says, "The people of Israel and the priests and the Levites have not separated themselves from the people of the lands, doing according to their abominations, even of the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Perizzites, the Jebusites, the Ammonites, the Moabites, the Egyptians, and the Amorites. For they have taken of their daughters for themselves and for their sons, so that the holy seed have mingled themselves with the people of those lands. Yea, the hand of the princes and rulers hath been chief in this trespass." So the Israelites have always been commingling with other pagan nations. This was a common thing as they fell into idolatry throughout the ages. That's where we get, the Samaritans, you get different groups, you get the Edomians, you get all these groups of mixed races who weren't true, like pure Jews or pure Israelites. Or we see in Nehemiah 13, 23 through 24, it says, "In those days also saw I Jews that had married wives of Ashdod, of Ammon, of Moab, and their children spake half in the speech of Ashdod, and could not speak in the Jews' language, but according to the language of each people." And the prohibition here isn't about race, it's about faith. It's about religion. God didn't want people to intermingle with, you don't want to marry an unbeliever. What fellowship hath light with darkness, right? So it causes problems in marriage, in your family, if you're married to an unbeliever. And so that was the prohibition. They would get led astray from the one true God of Israel. And so throughout the ages, as the Jews were dispersed to all the nations as a punishment for rejecting their own Messiah, the tribes were diluted. The tribes were heavily diluted, and it's impossible now to trace the lineage of the Jews or the Israelites thousands of years after the fact. In fact, Paul said specifically in 1 Timothy 1:4 not to give heed to fables and endless genealogies, which minister questions rather than godly edifying, which is in faith so do. So the genealogy was only for the purpose of establishing the messianic line of Christ. It was to pass on the birthright so that Christ could be born as the son of David and carry on, that Davidic covenant and promise that we talked about last week. And so, now in the New Testament, under the New Covenant, we're told not to even consider genealogy. There's neither Jew nor Greek nor Gentile, right? We're not even supposed to look at it. We're all one in Christ. Christ is the ultimate equalizer. We're all one. And so, why is a genealogy being considered here in the book of Revelation? And so this poses a problem. But there is a solution to the seeming contradiction, and we find the solution in Revelation 14, which features the 144,000 again in the second half of the book. So I covered already how it's divided in two. We get different facets. The timeline resets again. And so in Revelation 14, we gain greater insight into who the 144,000 are and where they come from. Okay, Revelation 14, a parallel to 7, says, "And I looked, and lo, a lamb stood on Mount Zion, and with him 144,000, having his Father's name written in their foreheads. And I heard a voice from heaven, as the voice of many waters, and as the voice of a great thunder. And I heard the voice of harpers harping with their harps. And they sung as it were a new song before the throne and before the four beasts and the elders. And no man could learn that song but the 144,000 which were redeemed from the earth." Remember that, they were redeemed from the earth. "These are they which were not defiled with women, for they are virgins. They are they which follow the Lamb whithersoever he goeth. These were redeemed from among men, being the first fruits unto God and to the Lamb." So the 144,000, we can get into all kinds of conspiracies about who they are, but what does the Bible actually say in terms of who they are? It says that they are the first fruits unto God. The Jewish people, the Israelites, were the first fruits. They were the chosen. Now the elect are those who believe in Jesus Christ and receive him by faith. But they were the chosen people. They were the first fruits. They were the first to come and worship God in spirit and in truth and, according to the tenets of the Old Covenant. And so we get greater insight and greater detail and clarity into who they are. And the chronology in Revelation 14 is the same timeline as Revelation 7. It's right after the tribulation, but before the rapture, which happens in the second half of chapter 7 and in the second half of chapter 14. This will become clearer when we get to Revelation 14, when we get to even 12, 13, 14, and I start to compare how those later chapters parallel those first 11 chapters, and you see a lot of things lining up, and it becomes crystal clear. But what we see here, if you follow along, in chapter 7, we first see the 144,000 sealed. Then we see the rapture of the church, that great multitude, which we're going to get to. The same thing happens in chapter 14. That was 7 and 14. We see the 144,000, and then we see the rapture of the church with the angels and Jesus coming to reap a harvest of souls. We'll get to that in today's sermon, but I'll show you that in a minute. You'll see how both chapters line up perfectly. And the reason I mention this is because if Revelation 14 is describing the same events and the same timeline as we see in chapter 7, but just from a different angle or a different facet, we can extrapolate certain facts, such as that the 144,000, such as what they're doing and what their purpose is. A lot of people just assume that the 144,000 are people who are alive presently and are on the earth during the tribulation. That's the common view. And they say that, they are virgin male Jews who get sealed prior to the rapture so that they will not be hurt from the plagues and judgments to come, right? That's the general common view. But Revelation 14, I believe, paints a different picture. It doesn't picture the 144,000 on the earth and then getting sealed and raptured up. It doesn't do that. It pictures them in heaven in Revelation 14. They're in the throne room of God with the Lamb and the one who sat on the throne prior to being sealed. And so you put these two chapters together the way Revelation is intended in those two halves, and we see that they actually begin in heaven. Again, Revelation 14:1 says, "And I looked, and lo, a lamb stood on the Mount Zion, and with him 144,000. And so where are the 144,000 in chapter 14? They're in heaven with Jesus at this point prior to the rapture, not before the rapture, as we'll see in a minute. And they're worshiping God in heaven. And the Bible calls them the first fruits unto God and to the Lamb. And that word first fruits is your major clue as to what's happening here. Because who are the first fruits according to the Bible? These would be the Hebrews or the Israelites, or 12,000 from each of the 12 original tribes. Jeremiah 2, the Old Testament prophet says in Jeremiah 2:3, Israel was holiness unto the Lord and the first fruits of his increase. And so the Israelites are called the first fruits of God in the Old Testament. And so the theory is, and this is, you can agree or disagree. It's not going to affect your salvation. But the theory is that the Old Testament saints, the Jews and Israelites from the 12 tribes who were faithful to God, who were male virgins, whom God redeemed out of the earth, were Old Testament Jewish believers that were faithful, and they were 12,000 tribes before they were diluted, when you could find 12,000, male virgins from each of those 12 specific tribes, and that they're in heaven with God. We see them pictured here in Revelation 14 with the Lamb, and God seals them in their foreheads and then sends them down to earth prior to pouring out his wrath, as we're going to see in Revelation 7. The church gets raptured, and the church is gone in Revelation 7, and the 144,000, I believe, are sealed and come down to the earth as witnesses, as 144,000 witnesses, evangelists, people that are, witnessing for the Lord and proclaiming the gospel, and these would be 144,000 male virgin Jews from those specific original 12 tribes before they got diluted. And so we'll look at this, and it would just make sense that they wouldn't be hurt. They would go through the wrath of God when God starts causing comets to hit the earth and locusts to come out of the bottomless pit. They'll have that seal. They'll be there as witnesses, and they won't be hurt during the wrath of God when the church is raptured out. And so it wouldn't make sense if they were, on the earth and there were present day, 12,000 people from these tribes, and they were sealed and then taken away. What would be the point of them being sealed in that case? Why would they get sealed and not be hurt by the plagues if they were going to be sealed and raptured out? Or the other possibility that some might say is, well, they're present day people, they get sealed and they're just left behind facing God's wrath, But why would God, leave behind these believers, right? It's like almost a punishment then in that case. But here, they're already in heaven. They come down to earth and they become these witnesses of the end times. And so instead, they're pictured in heaven. And so I believe the most logical, reasonable solution to the seeming problem of the DNA being diluted, to the mystery of who are the 144,000, why is God sealing 12,000 virgin male Jews right now, is that these are not new present-day Jews who will be sealed during the end times, but are Old Testament Jewish believers, the first fruits of God, 12,000 from each tribe, who had not yet intermingled to present-day levels. And so it's the only theory that makes sense to me, unless you want to spiritualize the Bible and say that they're just, representative of all believers, as some teach, or that, that they're just all the Jews or all the believers, but that's kind of spiritualizing it instead of reading it literally as I do. But given that they are called the first fruits of God, I think this fulfills a literal interpretation, and it solves all of the seeming contradictions and problems. So, there'll be these end times witnesses, and God will still have representatives here on earth, even after the church is raptured away. And that's what we get to next in Revelation 7:9.